The charismatic stranger. The room was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent light casting shadows on the walls of the small, suffocating space. Lucy Parker, a journalist, sat across from Ted Bundy in a maximum security prison. It was 1989, just days before his scheduled execution. Lucy had been granted a rare opportunity to interview one of the most notorious serial killers in American history, and the air was thick with anticipation. Ted was calm, even charming, as he acknowledged the situation with a wry smile. Limited, yes, that's one way to put it, he said when Lucy remarked on the short time he had left. He seemed almost amused by the prospect of his impending execution. Leaning back in his chair, he looked at her with a casual curiosity, as if this was just another conversation. Lucy, determined to get to the heart of his story, leaned forward and asked, "I want to understand who you were. People say you were charismatic, intelligent. How did someone like you end up here?" Ted's eyes sparkled with a hint of nostalgia, but there was something unsettling about the way he responded. "People love to create monsters," he said, his voice calm and measured. "It makes things easier, doesn't it? But a monster is just a man with different motives." There was no hint of remorse in his tone, just an eerie detachment. Lucy listened intently, her pen poised over her notepad. "If you're asking when it all started, well, you might be surprised. It wasn't a moment, Lucy. It was a process." The phrase hung in the air, heavy and cryptic. Lucy pressed him further. "So, you didn't just wake up one morning and decide to kill?" Ted laughed softly, the sound almost casual. "No, that would be too simple. I was like everyone else. Went to school, had friends, girlfriends, but there was something lurking. It wasn't something you'd notice unless you looked really close." He spoke of playing a role, of putting on a mask to hide whatever was hidden inside him. As Lucy scribbled down his words, she realized the chilling truth. Ted Bundy didn't see himself as a monster. He saw himself as an actor, playing a part that allowed him to blend in, to be seen as normal, even charming. He had perfected the art of deception, and it was this skill that made him so dangerous and so deadly. The mask slips. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. The initial curiosity was gone, replaced by a tense undercurrent. Lucy Parker had spent hours listening to Ted Bundy talk about his life, but now the darker details of his crimes began to emerge. Ted remained calm, his demeanor almost eerily casual, but Lucy could sense a change, a subtle shift in his tone, like a mask slipping. She decided to confront him. "You talk about playing a part. Did you ever show anyone your true self?" she asked, her voice firm yet probing. Ted's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something deeper appearing for just a moment. "No one ever wants to see what's beneath the mask, Lucy. That's why we wear it, right? To make others comfortable, to make them trust you." The simplicity of his statement sent a chill down her spine. Lucy thought of the countless women who had trusted him, lured in by his charm and good looks. "But the women you targeted, they had no reason to fear you," she said, almost as if seeking some form of explanation. Ted leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And that's the key, isn't it? If you can make someone feel safe, they're defenseless." He paused, as if savoring the words. "I was good at that. It's all about control. Being able to lure them in, that was power." Lucy's pen hesitated on her notepad. "You make it sound like a game." Ted's lips curled into a slow, almost condescending smile. "A game? No. Games are for fun, for amusement. It was survival, a need I couldn't explain even to myself. Like an itch you can't scratch, a hunger that never goes away." There was no remorse, no regret, just a chilling honesty that made Lucy's skin crawl. She pressed on, her voice wavering slightly. "So you never felt guilty? Not even for a moment?" Ted's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "Remorse is for those who have a conscience. I learned how to silence mine long ago." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of his words pressing down on Lucy like a dark cloud. She had expected evasions, justifications, but not this cold, calculated acknowledgement of his actions. As Ted leaned back, a sense of satisfaction evident in his expression, Lucy realized that she was speaking to a man who had never truly felt human, even as he pretended to be one. The mask had slipped, revealing not a monster, but something much more terrifying. A man without a conscience. The hunt. The interview room felt colder, the air thick with unease, as Lucy Parker prepared to delve deeper into Ted Bundy's psyche. She had already heard him talk about control and deception, but she needed to understand how he chose his victims. Ted remained calm, his unsettling composure never wavering. He seemed almost eager to share, as if he relished the chance to explain himself. You've been described as one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Lucy began, her voice steady despite her growing discomfort. How did you choose your victims, Ted? Was it random? Ted paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he considered the question. Random? No, nothing was random. There was always a pattern, a preference. He hesitated, then continued. Brunettes, mostly. I didn't think about it consciously, but maybe they reminded me of someone, a part of my past I wanted to relive or erase. Lucy caught the subtle shift in his tone, a momentary glimpse of something raw and unguarded. Was it your past, Ted? Or someone from it? She pressed, trying to pierce the calm facade he wore like armor. For a moment, there was a flash of anger in his eyes, quickly masked by his usual composure. The past doesn't matter. What matters is the present. The thrill of the chase, the adrenaline when they realized there was no escape. It's intoxicating. That's what people don't understand. It was never about who they were. It was about who I could become when I was with them. Lucy's pen hovered over her notepad as she processed his words. A predator, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If that's what you want to call it, Ted replied, a slow, almost mocking smile creeping across his lips. But tell me, Lucy, aren't we all predators in our own way? You, for example, you're here to dissect me, to feed off my story. What does that make you? The question hung in the air, cutting through Lucy's attempt to maintain control. She felt a chill run down her spine, realizing that Ted wasn't just confessing, he was challenging her, turning the conversation into a twisted game of power. I'm here for the truth, she managed to say, trying to hold her ground. Ted leaned back, his eyes gleaming with a dark satisfaction. And that's what makes this so interesting. You want the truth, but you don't realize that sometimes the truth is just as dangerous as the lies. You're hunting me, but in a way, I'm hunting you too. As the words sank in, Lucy understood that for Ted Bundy, the hunt was never about the victim. It was about control, power, and turning the tables. Even in that small room, facing his own end, he was still trying to manipulate, still playing the predator. The final hours. The interview room was quiet, suffocatingly still. Lucy Parker sat across from Ted Bundy for the last time, aware that in a few hours he would be led to the electric chair. The days of interviews had left her drained, but she knew this was her final chance to uncover any last piece of truth. Ted's demeanor had changed. The usual smug confidence seemed to have faded, leaving only a shadow of the man who once reveled in his games. Tomorrow, it ends, Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper. How do you feel, knowing this is it? Ted's smile was faint, almost wistful, but his eyes remained dark and unreadable. How do you think I feel? He said, his voice quieter than she'd heard before. I've had years to make peace with this moment, but the truth is, Lucy, there's no peace, just silence, the end of a story. For a moment, he looked distant, as if contemplating his own words. Lucy hesitated, then asked, If you could go back, do it differently, would you? Ted's expression softened, and for the first time, there was a hint of vulnerability, as if he was considering the question seriously. People like to think there's redemption in reflection, that if I had more time, I'd feel differently. But the reality is, I made my choices, and now I live, or rather die, with them. His tone was calm, almost resigned, as if he had accepted his fate but hadn't entirely understood it. She searched his face for any sign of regret, but found none. Any last words for the people who will read this? She asked, knowing it might be her final question to him. Ted leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers with an unsettling intensity. They'll read this and search for reasons, for explanations, but there's nothing I can say that will make sense of it. Some minds are just wired differently. If they want to understand, they need to look deeper. And maybe they won't like what they find. Lucy felt a chill as she realized he wasn't just talking about himself. He was offering a dark reflection of humanity, a reminder that the line between normalcy and darkness was thinner than most would care to admit. And what will they find, Ted? She whispered, her voice barely steady. A slow, eerie smile crept across his face, but there was no warmth in it, just a cold, unsettling certainty. A reflection of themselves. he said softly, as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. The guard stepped in, signaling the end of the interview. Lucy gathered her notes, her hands trembling slightly, and stood to leave. As she walked out, she glanced back at Ted. He was staring at the wall, lost in thought, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she felt a strange pang of pity, but it was quickly swallowed by the gravity of what he had done. The door closed behind her with a heavy, final thud, sealing away a dark chapter of history that would haunt those who tried to make sense of it, leaving behind only the chilling words of a man who never truly saw.